What would you do if the horse you trusted more than anything suddenly exploded in fury and nearly crushed you against a wall? Everyone at Walker Ranch thought they were witnessing a rancher's worst nightmare, an 800-pound animal snapping without warning, turning deadly in a heartbeat. But the truth hiding behind that violent outburst was something no one on the ranch, not even the man who raised the horse, could have imagined. Lean in close, take a breath. Because what happened next shocked everyone. Let's begin the story. Late afternoon light drifted across the Walker Ranch as Ethan Walker stepped out of the house with a heavy metal bucket in his hand. The Montana air carried a faint bite, cool enough to promise a chilly night, but still warm where the sun lingered on the ridges. Dust skimmed across the dirt yard in thin sheets, each time the wind nudged the fence line, lifting and dropping the loose topsoil like a breath. The ranch was unusually quiet. From somewhere far out in the west pasture came the muffled rhythm of hooves, his small herd moving lazily as the day wound down. Up close, however, everything was still. The barns, the fences, the feed bins, even the birds seemed subdued, as if the ranch itself was taking a late afternoon pause. Ethan walked toward the horse barn boots crunching on gravel and nudged the gate open with his hip. The long interior smelled of hay dust and the faint sweetness of old wood. He turned on the hose and filled the worn wooden trough, glancing over at the next stall, where Ironclad was standing. Ironclad, a big, muscular bay gelding, with a deep chest and a long scar across the bridge of his nose, kept his head down, pulling mouthfuls of hay from the feeder. Nothing about him looked unusual. His ears flicked lazily, more out of habit than alertness, and his tail swished idly to chase off a couple of persistent flies. Ethan let out a small exhale. Routine. Predictable. Steady. That was Iron, always had been. He twisted the hose shut and set the bucket down. Lily will be out here soon. He thought, smiling at the idea of his 8-year-old daughter skipping across the yard with her little grooming brush. She brushed Iron's coat almost every day after school, chattering about everything from math class to pine cones. And Iron always lowered his giant head for her patient in a way few horses ever managed to be. It was a peaceful image, one Ethan clung to without even realizing it. But peace is fragile on a ranch, and sometimes it shatters without warning. Ethan had barely taken 2 steps toward the barn door when a violent thunder of hooves slammed against the hard-packed dirt behind him. He froze, instinct jerking through his muscles, but he didn't even have time to turn his head. A massive force crashed into his back. The impact was so powerful his vision flashed white. His ribs seized. The breath blasted out of him as he flew forward, slamming into the wooden wall so hard the boards shuddered. His bucket clattered loudly across the floor. Before he could understand what had hit him, something pushed into him again, harder this time, crushing him against the wall. Ethan's eyes squeezed shut. A raw, panicked gasp caught in his throat. It was Iron. The weight, the breath, the heat, the sheer power pressing into him left no doubt. Ironclad shoved forward with his broad chest and thick neck, ramming Ethan into the boards, as if trying to pin him there permanently. Ethan felt the wooden planks flex behind him. He raised an arm to shield his face, but it barely helped. Iron's frantic breaths blasted against his cheek, hot, sharp, almost desperate. Then Iron reared. Ethan heard the hooves leave the ground, felt the sudden emptiness as the pressure on him vanished. And then, boom! Iron's hooves slammed into the dirt, shaking the barn floor so hard dust rained down from the rafters. The horse screamed a guttural primal sound Ethan had never heard from him before. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pain. It sounded like rage. Iron struck again, pawing, stomping, snorting furiously. The whites of his eyes flashed, his muscles bunched and flexed in panic. Ethan was sure, absolutely certain, that Iron meant to kill him. "Easy, Iron, easy," he choked out, though he knew the horse wasn't listening. Iron stomped again, dust exploding beneath his hooves. Ethan pressed himself harder against the wall chest, burning shoulder throbbing, trying to protect his head as best he could. His heart hammered violently, drowning out everything else. What the hell had gotten into the horse, and with them the misunderstanding that sealed Iron's fate? Miguel Ortiz, the ranch hand, burst out from the storage shed when he heard the commotion. "Ethan," he yelled, sprinting full speed toward the barn. "Ethan Irons attacking you." Miguel's shout sliced through the air. Iron's ears flicked backward, but the horse didn't retreat. If anything, he seemed more agitated, weaving left and right, snorting hard enough to spray flecks of foam. Miguel waved his arms, trying to draw Iron's attention, but the horse barely responded. He was locked onto Ethan, breathing heavily through flared nostrils, muscles quivering. From farther across the yard, Tom Reeves, Ethan's neighbor, had just finished stacking hay bales on the back of his pickup. He turned as the noise froze, then shouted across the fence, "Ethan, get out of there. The horse has gone bad. He'll kill you if you stay near him." Ethan heard the words as he struggled to turn his body. His muscles screamed in protest. Iron staggered forward again, and Ethan braced himself for another blow, another slam of bone and muscle that might cave his ribs. But then, somehow, Iron hesitated. He backed up a step. Just one. But it was enough. Ethan twisted sideways, stumbling out of the narrow gap and collapsing onto the dirt. Pain exploded in his shoulder and down his spine. His palms scraped against gravel. He gasped, dragging air into his lungs. Everything hurt. Miguel reached him first. "Jesus, Ethan, are you okay? He almost crushed you." Tom ran up behind him. "I've seen horses snap before, but never this bad. You need to put that animal down before he hurts someone else." Ethan looked up. Iron stood 10 feet away, chest rising and falling sharply, whole body tense. To everyone watching, to Ethan himself, it looked exactly like a horse who had lost control of his instincts. A dangerous horse. A horse that had turned. And Ethan believed it. Because everything he had just felt, the force, the screams, the unpredictability, it all pointed to one conclusion: Ironclad had become a threat. He was still catching his breath when he heard footsteps, a lighter, quicker rhythm coming from the front yard. Daddy Lily's voice. Ethan spun around despite the pain shooting through his ribs. His daughter jogged toward the barn, holding her worn-out grooming brush in one hand. "Daddy, I heard loud noises. Is Iron okay?" Her innocence struck Ethan harder than Iron's hooves had. "Lily, stop," Ethan barked louder than intended. "Don't come any closer." Lily froze, confused. Her eyes flicked toward Iron, who now stood completely still, staring at her with an unreadable expression. He looked scared. Lily whispered. Ethan stepped in front of her, shielding her from the horse. Images flashed through his mind. Iron lunging again, Iron slamming into her small frame, Iron crushing her beneath half a ton of muscle. Just the thought made his stomach twist. Tom put a hand on his shoulder and spoke quietly but firmly, "Ethan, you can't risk that happening to your girl. Something is wrong with that horse. You need to deal with it before someone gets hurt. Badly." The words cut deep because they were true. Ethan felt it in his bones. He decided Iron had to die. Ethan guided Lily back into the house, locked the door, and told her not to come outside under any circumstances. Then he walked into his bedroom. His hands trembled as he pulled the old wooden case down from the closet shelf. Inside lay his father's hunting shotgun, cleaned and oiled, but unused for years. Just touching it sent a wave of guilt rolling through him. Iron had been with him for 6 years. 6 years of work, loyalty, and quiet companionship. But what choice did he have? He stepped outside again. The sun hung low, stretching long shadows across the barnyard. Iron still stood near the fence, unmoving, as if he were waiting for something. Ethan lifted the shotgun, bracing the stock against his shoulder. He aimed it squarely at Iron's forehead. The horse didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't step back. Iron simply breathed slow, steady, and heartbreakingly calm. His dark eyes locked onto Ethan's. And in that moment, Ethan felt something shift. There was no anger in Iron's gaze, no wildness, no violence, only trust. A trust Ethan no longer deserved. Ethan's finger hovered over the trigger. His hand began to shake violently. He exhaled, his shoulders sagged, and he lowered the gun. He couldn't do it. Iron had nearly crushed him, but Ethan couldn't bring himself to kill the animal who had once carried Lily gently through meadows, who had worked beside him every day without complaint. Killing Iron felt like killing something inside himself. He would have to make another choice, one that felt almost as cruel. Ethan returned the shotgun to its box, placed it on the kitchen table with a heavy sigh, and picked up the phone. He dialed Monroe Livestock Facility. Caleb Monroe answered on the second ring, a businessman with a reputation for being efficient, blunt, and uninterested in emotional discussions. "I've got a gelding I need gone," Ethan said. "Big, healthy, 6 years old." Monroe didn't ask many questions. "Fine," he replied. "I'll send a truck in an hour." When the call ended, Ethan felt hollow, like he had swallowed a stone that would never digest. But at least Iron wouldn't suffer aimlessly. At least Lily would be safe. That was what mattered. Or so Ethan told himself. And Ironclad walked toward betrayal with quiet obedience. Exactly 1 hour later, a painful, silent hour during which Ethan paced the yard and tried not to think the Monroe livestock truck rolled into the ranch. 2 men hopped out, lowered the loading ramp, and stood waiting. Ethan fetched Iron from the paddock, holding the lead rope loosely but firmly. Iron walked beside him without resistance, though his ears flicked back, as if sensing something wrong. When they reached the ramp, Iron paused and looked back at Ethan. Not fearfully, not nervously, just searching, as if asking for reassurance. Ethan swallowed hard. "Go on, boy," he whispered. Iron stepped up the ramp hooves, clattering against metal. He walked inside calmly, turning his head once more, as if memorizing Ethan's face. Ethan couldn't bear it. He looked away. The doors slammed shut. The lock clicked. The engine rumbled. Daddy Lily's voice again, this time high and breathless. She came running into the yard just as the truck began to roll forward. "Daddy, where's Iron? Where are they taking him?" Ethan knelt, heart cracking. "They're taking him out to a pasture far away," he lied softly. "He'll get some rest there." Lily blinked, trusting. "Oh. Okay." She waved at the shrinking truck, unaware of the truth. Ethan watched the dust rise behind it as it disappeared down the road. And when it was finally gone, he stood alone in the yard, the cold Montana wind pushing against his chest, and felt the weight of his choice settle heavily over him. He had done what he thought was right, but it felt unbearably wrong. Why did Ironclad explode like that? Was it rage, fear, or something else entirely? And if you were Ethan, would you have made the same impossible choice? Tell us what you think. And don't forget to hit subscribe before we dive into the most incredible part of this story. Morning arrived cold and clean over Walker Ranch. The Montana sun had barely lifted above the ridgeline, and the early light stretched long across the frost-dusted ground. Dew clung to every blade of grass, catching the sunlight like fragments of glass. Ethan Walker stood in the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes as he poured himself a cup of coffee. He lifted the mug to his lips, and a scream tore through the quiet. A high, sharp, terrified scream. Lily. The coffee cup slipped from Ethan's fingers, and shattered against the floor, spraying hot liquid across his boots. He didn't even feel it. His heart slammed once hard enough to steal his breath, and he sprinted toward the door. He burst into the yard. Lily was standing near the horse barn, small and trembling, her face drained of color. The brush she always used to groom Ironclad dangled forgotten in her hand. Her eyes were fixed on something in the grass beside the barn wall. "Daddy," her voice shook. "Daddy, there's something, there's a snake." Ethan's stomach dropped as he ran to her. There, lying stretched across a patch of tall grass, was a western diamondback rattlesnake, massive, easily 4.5 feet long. The diamond-shaped pattern along its body was unmistakable. The head was twisted unnaturally, the body crushed in several places, as though struck repeatedly by something heavy. Dirt clung to its scales. The tail lay still, but the rattle was partially buried in the soil, as if the snake had thrashed before dying. Lily stumbled backward, voice trembling. "Daddy, I think it was alive earlier, but it won't move now." Ethan knelt, forcing calm into his breathing even as dread tightened through him. "It's dead, sweetheart. You're okay. Just stay back." But something about the scene tugged at him. Something wrong, something familiar. He crouched lower. The earth around the snake was soft, still damp with morning dew, and imprinted with hoof marks. Deep ones, circular, dented, sharp-edged. Ethan leaned closer, brushing his fingers lightly along the indentation. A half-moon notch cut into the edge of one of the prints. His heart stuttered. That notch, Ironclad's left front hoof, had worn that exact shape for years, ever since an injury as a 2-year-old. Ethan shifted his gaze toward the barn wall, the same wall Iron had slammed him against yesterday. The same spot where Ethan thought he'd been attacked. And suddenly, every detail from the day before rearranged itself like puzzle pieces snapping into place. Iron hadn't been looking at Ethan before charging. Iron had been looking past him. At the grass, at the snake, at the danger Ethan never saw. The horse's wild eyes afterward, the panic in them, the way Iron stayed between Ethan and the tall grass, as if guarding him. It all made sense now. Iron hadn't exploded in rage. Iron had saved his life. A violent shiver ran down Ethan's spine as cold understanding settled in. He whispered, barely hearing his own voice. "Oh, God. Iron wasn't attacking me. He was trying to save me." Lily, still hovering a few feet away, heard him. "Iron saved you, Daddy?" she asked softly, confusion wrinkling her brow. But Ethan didn't answer, because a new realization hit him just as hard. He had sent Iron to a slaughter facility. He had handed over the animal that saved his life, delivered him straight into the hands of people who didn't care who lived or died. His knees nearly buckled under the weight of it. He stood abruptly, nearly stumbling as he rushed toward the truck parked by the barn. He didn't stop for a jacket, didn't tie his boots, didn't think. He only ran. "Daddy, where are you going?" Lily called out, frightened. Ethan's voice cracked as he shouted back, "Stay inside, Lily. Don't come out." His hands shook so violently, he dropped the keys when he pulled them from his pocket. They hit the dirt with a dull clink. He snatched them up again, killed the trembling long enough to jam the key into the ignition. Then he grabbed his phone. He dialed the Monroe Livestock Facility. The line clicked. A female receptionist answered. "Monroe Livestock. How can I assist?" "It's Walker." Ethan gasped. "I sold you a horse yesterday, Ironclad. I need to stop the process. I need him back." "I'm coming. Don't do anything. Don't." "One moment, sir." She interrupted politely, transferring the call. Seconds stretched into eternity before another voice came on the line. "This is the floor manager. What's the issue?" My horse ironclad, and Ethan repeated, voice breaking. Do not send him through. I'm on my way. Please. Pages shuffled in the background. Then the manager said flat, emotionless, Ironclad is in the current lot. He'll be entering the holding chute in about 20 minutes. 20 minutes? Ethan nearly shouted into the phone. Don't touch him. I'm coming right now. Do not put him down. But the line had already gone dead. Something inside Ethan snapped loose. He shoved the phone onto the passenger seat, slammed the truck door, and stomped the accelerator. The wheels spun, flinging a red cloud of dust into the air as the truck lurched forward. Hold on, Iron. Ethan whispered, voice cracking. I'm coming. I swear to God, I'm coming. The speedometer needle climbed past 60, past 70, past 90. Wind roared against the windows. His truck rattled from the speed, the chassis humming like it might tear itself apart. His eyes stung not from the wind, but from the weight of everything he'd done. Iron stepping quietly into the trailer. Iron pausing, looking back at him. Iron trusting him blindly, a trust Ethan had broken. The road to Billings unfurled before him, long and straight across the open prairie. No other cars, no obstacles, only miles of asphalt and the desperate beat of his pulse urging him faster. He gripped the wheel tighter. Please, Iron, please hold on. As he reached the outskirts of Billings, flashing hazard lights broke the horizon. A line of cars stretched ahead, unmoving. Drivers stood outside their vehicles, staring at a large cottonwood tree that had fallen across the road during last night's windstorm, completely blocking the main highway. Ethan's heart hammered wildly. No. No. He couldn't wait. He couldn't lose even 1 minute. He scanned frantically until he spotted a narrow dirt road veering off to the right. Barely more than 2 ruts carved between brush. No signs. No guarantees. But it was a path. And that was all he needed. He jerked the wheel right. Gravel churned beneath the tires. The truck fishtailed for a moment before catching traction and barreling down the rough dirt path. The road was brutal, deep potholes, jutting rocks, jagged dips that nearly sent the truck airborne. Branches slapped the sides of the vehicle as he plowed into a patch of overgrowth. The truck lunged violently as the right wheel hit a hole. Ethan gritted his teeth and held the wheel steady. The trees grew thicker overhead, cutting the sunlight into broken flickers across the windshield. He leaned hard into a sharp turn. Too hard. The back of the truck slid sideways, skidding on loose soil. The tail end swung dangerously close to a towering pine tree, missing it by inches. His heart leapt into his throat. He forced the truck back under control, breathing hard, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't think. He kept going. Finally, the dirt road spit him back onto pavement just beyond the blocked area. He floored the gas and shot forward again. He had barely regained speed when flashing red and blue lights erupted behind him. A police cruiser. A siren wailed. Ethan's stomach dropped. The cruiser surged up beside him, and the officer inside motioned aggressively for him to pull over. He had no choice. He slammed the brakes. The cruiser stopped behind him. Dust rolled through the air in thick waves as Deputy Sarah Collins stepped out, one hand hovering near her belt. She approached the driver's window, eyes narrowed. "Sir," she began sharply, "you were going 40 miles over the legal speed limit. Step out of the— I don't have time." Ethan cut in, voice cracking. His pulse was a pounding drum. "My horse ironclad, they're about to kill him at Monroe's facility. He saved my life yesterday. I thought he attacked me, but he didn't. He saved me from a rattlesnake. Please, please. I only have minutes." He didn't even realize tears had filled his eyes until he saw Sarah's expression shift. Her grip on her belt loosened. She took a small step back and studied him, his shaking hands, his ragged breath, and the desperation radiating from every inch of him. Finally, she exhaled. "Go," she said quietly, "but drive safely. And if anything happens, it's on you." Ethan didn't wait for her to finish. He stomped the gas pedal, the truck roaring forward again, leaving the cruiser swallowed in dust. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Every second was a second Iron might not have. And Ethan would burn through every mile of Montana if it meant reaching his horse in time. Ethan hit the brakes so hard the truck fish-tailed tires screaming against the concrete. The front bumper stopped only a few feet short of the metal gate of Monroe Livestock Facility. Before the engine had even finished shuddering, he threw the door open and jumped out. Lungs burning, heart punching at his ribs. A security guard stepped out of the gatehouse, hand raised. "Hey, you can't just... I need my horse." Ethan shouted, voice raw. "Ironclad, where is he?" The guard's protests died on his lips when he saw Ethan's face, eyes, bloodshot chest, heaving desperation etched into every line. After a brief hesitation, the man exhaled, shook his head, and hit the button. The gate clanked and began to slide open. "Make it quick," he muttered. Ethan didn't wait to answer. He sprinted across the broad concrete yard, boots slapping so loudly they nearly drowned out the distant mechanical hum. The smell hit him first, hot metal, old blood, disinfectant, manure, all tangled into a suffocating cloud that seemed to cling to his skin, his clothes, his very breath. He pushed through the swinging door and into the main building. The noise inside was worse. Machines droned in a steady rhythm. Somewhere above, chains clinked and rattled. Hydraulic pistons hissed. Cows and cattle lowed weakly in narrow holding pens, their calls echoing off the high-stained ceilings. Doors slammed. Metal gates screeched. The entire place felt like a factory built specifically to erase life as efficiently as possible. Ethan swallowed against the bile rising in his throat and forced himself to keep moving. He knew what he was looking for. The chute, the line, the place where animals waited their turn. He turned a corner, and there it was, a long, narrow metal corridor, fenced on both sides, just wide enough for one animal at a time. The floor sloped gently forward, leading toward a heavy door at the end, an innocuous barrier, if you didn't know what lay behind it. The chute was full. Cattle stood nose to tail, pressed so close they could barely move their heads. Their hooves shuffled nervously when the line advanced another step. Their breaths came in anxious grunts and sighs. Ethan's gaze traveled down the line and then stopped. The third animal from the end wasn't a steer. It was a horse. His horse. Ironclad. Ethan's chest seized. Iron stood with his head hanging low, shoulders trembling. His coat, usually bright and clean, was damp along the neck, darkened with sweat. Each time the line shifted forward, he tried instinctively to step back, but there was nowhere to go. Thick metal bars hemmed him in on both sides. Another animal pressed against his hindquarters. The door to death stood only a few yards ahead. "Stop the line," Ethan yelled, stumbling toward the rail. His hand slammed against the metal so hard it stung. "That's my horse. Stop it." A couple of workers near a control panel turned their heads, frowning. One started to say something about safety regulations and restricted access. But before he could finish, a glass office door above the floor swung open. Caleb Monroe stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a clean button-down that contrasted sharply with the stained overalls of his employees. His hair was streaked with gray at the temples, his jaw set in a calm, practiced neutrality. He held a mug of coffee as if this were any other morning. "Mr. Walker," he called down, voice carrying easily over the ambient noise. "I assume you're the one making all this racket about a horse." Ethan looked up, hate and hope warring inside him. He moved closer so he didn't have to shout quite as loud. "You bought Ironclad from me yesterday," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. I need him back. Right now. I was wrong about him. He saved my life, and I sent him here. I can't," his voice cracked. "I can't let him die here." Monroe took a slow sip of coffee, studying Ethan like a problem written on a whiteboard. "Mr. Walker," he said, finally descending the stairs with measured steps, "our transaction is complete. You took the money. You signed the papers. The animal is now property of this facility." "Then let me buy him back," Ethan insisted, desperation edging sharp into his words. "I don't care what it costs." Monroe sighed, sounding almost bored. "You're under the impression that emotions change contracts. They don't. This place," he gestured around them, "runs on a schedule. On efficiency, not on regret." Behind him, the line clanked forward one notch. The animals shifted uneasily. Iron bumped a few inches closer to the final door. Ethan flinched at the sound. He tore into his jacket pocket, pulled out a crumpled envelope, the cash he hadn't yet taken to the bank from the sale. He ripped it open and shoved the contents into his palms, bills wrinkled and folded, but very real. "I'll pay you double," he said, thrusting the money toward Monroe. "Whatever you gave me, this is twice that. Take it. Just give me my horse back." Monroe glanced down at the pile of cash as if Ethan were holding out a handful of dirt. "Double," he repeated, a short, humorless chuckle escaping him. "Ethan, you're underestimating the value of my time and the value of a fully running line." He didn't reach for the money. Ethan tried to force it into his hand anyway. "Please take it. It's all I've got." Monroe pulled back and then folded his arms across his chest. His tone shifted, turning sharper, more calculating. "If you truly want that animal," he said, "the price is $6,000. Ethan stared at him. $6,000 in your truck," Monroe added casually. "That old Ford F-250 you pulled up in, throw that in too." Ethan felt the world tilt. "That's everything I own," he whispered. Monroe's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Exactly." For a moment, Ethan couldn't move. He thought of the ranch accounts already stretched thin, the repairs he'd been putting off, the truck he used for everything from hauling feed to taking Lily into town. He looked back down the chute. Iron was trembling now, muscles twitching beneath his coat. A faint shudder ran through his whole body. The horse shifted his weight ears, flicking back and forth as though he could sense something approaching that he couldn't see. Monroe stepped a little closer, voice dropping to a low, almost intimate warning. "You've got 3 minutes, Mr. Walker. If you can't decide by then, the line will do what it's designed to do, and there will be no going back." 3 minutes. Ethan's grip tightened around the wad of bills in his hands until they crinkled. He thought of the rattlesnake, of Iron slamming him into the wall to push him out of harm's way, of the scar on the horse's nose that he'd touched 100 times while Lily giggled on Iron's back. He thought of Lily waiting at home, trusting him. Slowly, Ethan inhaled. "Fine," he said, voice low but unwavering. "You can have it all." He opened his hand and pressed the money firmly into Monroe's palm. With his other hand, he dug into his pocket, pulled out the keys to the Ford, and dropped them on top of the cash. Metal clinked against paper. Monroe closed his fingers around the lot with a satisfied nod. "Pleasure doing business," he said. Then he motioned to the man at the control panel. "Pull the third one off." Owner reclaimed the animal. The worker nodded and pulled a lever. Somewhere inside, the machinery gears clanked and metal groaned. A side gate on the chute creaked open halfway down. A second employee moved down the line with a long fiberglass pole, tapping the animals in front to shift them forward, then turning to Iron. He nudged the gelding's flank. "Come on, boy. Out you go. Your owner's come to get you." But Iron didn't move. He stood frozen, head still, lowered eyes dull with shock and exhaustion. His sides rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. The tension in his muscles had gone past the point of trembling. Now they simply felt locked, stiff as stone. The worker frowned and tapped a little harder. "Hey, move. You're free, idiot." Still nothing. From the walkway above, Monroe shook his head. "He's shut down," he said. "Happens sometimes. Stress takes the fight out of them." "Stop touching him," Ethan shouted. Before anyone could grab him or yell about regulations, he vaulted the railing and dropped down into the narrow chute itself. His boots slipped slightly on the damp concrete, but he caught his balance and pushed forward. The air in the chute was close and sour with a smell of fear and disinfectant. The metal walls amplified every sound breaths, hoof shifts, distant machine noise into an echoing chamber. When he reached iron, Ethan slowed. The horse was bigger up close than he'd remembered from the pasture, towering, massive, all hard lines and strained muscles. But up close, Ethan could also feel the tiny, uncontrollable quiver in Iron's neck and shoulders. He lifted both hands and laid them gently against the horse's cheeks. "Iron," he said softly, voice breaking. "It's me. I'm here. We're going home." For a moment, nothing changed. Then Iron's ears flicked. Slowly, so slowly, Ethan could have sworn time stopped. The horse raised his head. His dark eyes, still glassy with fear, found Ethan's face. Recognition flickered there, uncertain at first, then growing stronger. Ethan slid one palm up the length of Iron's nose, tracing the familiar ridge and the long, pale scar that cut across it. "I'm sorry, boy," he whispered, feeling tears sting the corners of his eyes. "I should have trusted you. You were protecting me, and I sold you off like you were nothing. I am so sorry." Iron made a low sound in his chest, a soft, rumbling whine that seemed to vibrate against Ethan's palms. The horse's whole frame sagged a little, as if some terrible weight had finally slid from his back. Ethan reached down, picked up the lead rope clipped to Iron's halter, and gave it the gentlest tug. "Come on," he murmured. "Let's get out of here." Iron hesitated just a heartbeat. Then he took a step, one slow, deliberate step, then another. The workers watched in silence. Some leaned on the rail arms, folded expressions, caught somewhere between curiosity and unexpected respect. They'd seen thousands of animals move through this place. But it wasn't every day you saw a half-broken horse find his will to live again just because his owner stepped into the chute. The side gate was held open. Ethan led Iron through it and into a small holding pen off to the side. The noise of the main line dulled slightly, but the smell and the tension still hung in the air. Up on the walkway, Monroe looked down at them, one hand in his pocket, the other holding Ethan's keys and money. His expression was hard to read, part smug businessman who just secured a good deal, part reluctant witness to a moment that had nothing to do with profit. Ethan didn't look up at him. He just stroked Iron's neck, feeling the horse's heartbeat slowly steady under his hand. "Let's go home," he said again. And this time Iron seemed ready to believe him. The back gate of the facility clanged shut behind them, sealing off the noise and the metal and the smell. For the first time in what felt like hours, Ethan stepped onto open ground with Iron at his side. The lot behind Monroe's was a wide slab of concrete bordered by chain-link fence and stacked pallets. Beyond that rose the rectangular shapes of warehouses and low industrial buildings. The sky was brighter here, unbroken by walls, but the air still tasted faintly of steel and chemicals. Ethan glanced automatically toward the parking area. The space where his old Ford F-250 had been was empty now. Just oil stains and an abandoned cigarette butt where his truck had once stood. He blew out a breath and tightened his grip on Iron's lead rope. "Well," he murmured, running his other hand down Iron's neck, "guess it's just us." Iron stayed close to him, shoulder almost brushing his side. His head hung a little lower than usual, but his breathing had calmed, and the wildness had faded from his eyes. Each step they took away from the facility seemed to loosen something inside both of them. They made their way out of the back gate and onto the side street that ran past the industrial complex. A couple of workers on a smoke break turned to stare. One of them let out a low whistle, "You see that," he said to his buddy. "Guy just walked a horse out of Monroe's." The other shook her head and lifted her phone, snapping a quick photo. "Never thought I'd see that." Usually they go in one way only. As Ethan and Iron moved from the industrial park toward the main road, traffic slowed. Drivers did double takes. A few people leaned out their windows for a better look. Some just smiled, surprised. Others frowned, unsure what kind of story they were witnessing. Ethan didn't meet their eyes. He didn't have room in his mind for strangers' curiosity. Every scrap of his focus was on the path ahead and the horse beside him. He was about half a mile out when an old green pickup rumbled up behind them and eased off the gas. The truck crawled along the shoulder until it rolled beside them. "Ethan," a familiar voice called. "What in the world happened to your truck, and why are you walking a horse home?" Ethan glanced over. Frank Dalton, his neighbor from a few miles down the road, leaned out the driver's window. His hat was tipped back and his brows drew together in concern as he took in the sight of Ethan's dusty clothes and Iron's sweat-streaked coat. "It's a long story," Ethan said with a tired, lopsided smile. "Short version, I don't have a truck anymore. Just this guy." Frank's gaze shifted to Iron, then back to Ethan. Something softened in his face. "I can throw some of this hay out of the bed and load him up," Frank offered. "Take you both back to the ranch. No sense walking all that way." Ethan was tempted, deeply tempted. His legs already ached, and the thought of several more miles on foot with a 1,000-pound animal tugging at his arm was not appealing. But then he noticed a small trailer hitched to Frank's truck and the anxious lowing coming from inside it. "You taking one of your cows to the vet?" Ethan asked. Frank nodded. "Yeah, she's bad off. Clinic closes in an hour and I'm still 5 miles out. But I can." Ethan shook his head, cutting him off gently. "No, go. She needs you more than we do." Frank hesitated. Then he gave Ethan a long, measuring look before finally nodding. "You're a good man, Ethan," he said quietly. "Take care of that horse." "I will," Ethan replied. Frank tipped 2 fingers to the brim of his hat, then pulled forward, the trailer rattling behind him as he headed toward the town. The road felt a little quieter after that. The sun had begun its slow descent, turning the sky into streaks of gold and rose. Long shadows spilled across the fields, and the edges of the clouds glowed like they'd been lit from within. Ethan and Iron's shadows stretched out in front of them on the cracked pavement, 2 elongated figures trudging side by side. By the time they turned off the main road onto the dirt lane that led to Walker Ranch, Ethan's shirt clung to his back with sweat, and his legs felt like they were made of wet sand. But his heart had never felt lighter. The familiar landmarks appeared one by one. The old fence post with the leaning top, the bent mailbox, the cottonwood tree that marked the halfway point. Finally, as they came up over the last small rise, the ranch itself came into view, house, barn, corral, all bathed in the soft orange glow of evening. At the gate, a small figure was waiting. Lily? She stood gripping the top rail of the fence with both hands, eyes scanning the road like she was willing her father to appear out of thin air. When she saw him, her whole body jolted. When she saw Iron, she screamed. But this time it was pure joy. "Iron!" she shouted, already scrambling down from the fence. "You came back." "Easy," Ethan said quickly, pulling gently on the lead rope, slowing Iron's pace as Lily sprinted toward them, so fast she nearly tripped over her own feet. She skidded to a stop beside the gelding, flinging her arms around his thick neck without a hint of fear. Her cheek pressed into his warm coat. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes, but she was smiling so widely it looked like her face might split. Iron froze for half a second, then lowered his head, letting his muzzle rest against the side of her shoulder. He blew a soft breath into her hair, eyes half closing. Ethan watched them, something tight in his chest, loosening all the way. After a moment, he sank down into a crouch beside Lily, one hand resting lightly on her back. "Lily," he said softly, "there's something I need to tell you." She turned, still hugging Iron with one arm. "What is it? Yesterday?" "Iron didn't hurt me." Ethan said the confession finally leaving his mouth. "He saved my life." Her eyes widened. "Saved you?" From what Ethan glanced toward the patch of grass by the barn wall where the dead rattlesnake still lay, now covered with a shovelful of dirt. "From a rattlesnake," he answered. "A big one." "I didn't see it. But Iron did. He pushed me into the wall so I wouldn't step on it. I thought he was attacking me, but he was just trying to keep me alive." Lily looked up at Iron again, then back at her father, her expression caught between awe and vindication. "I knew he wouldn't hurt you, Daddy," she said, hugging Iron tighter. "I just knew it." Ethan swallowed past the lump in his throat. Lily was quiet for a moment, tracing her fingers through Iron's mane. Then she frowned a little. "Daddy, where's our truck?" she asked. "Did it break down?" Ethan took a slow breath, eyes dropping to the dusty ground for a moment before he met her gaze again. "I traded it," he said simply, "to bring Iron home." Lily's brow furrowed. For a few seconds, she seemed to calculate that in her head, the weight of a truck against the weight of a horse. Then, all at once, her face cleared. "That's okay," she said, like it was the easiest decision in the world. "Iron's worth more than any truck." Ethan let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He pulled her into a hug, one arm wrapping around her shoulders while the other held onto the lead rope. "You're right," he whispered into her hair. "You're absolutely right." Later, Ethan led Iron back into his stall. The gelding went straight to the water trough and drank deeply, gulping mouthful after mouthful, like he hadn't known real water all day. Then he moved to the hay. Lily brought tearing into it with an appetite that made Ethan smile. The last of the sunlight poured through the barn door, casting everything in a soft, golden haze. Dust motes hovered in the air like tiny drifting stars. The scar on Iron's nose caught the light, standing out pale against his dark coat. Ethan leaned against the stall gate, hands resting on the worn wood, just watching. He watched Iron eat and drink and breathe. He watched Lily stand beside him, one small hand resting on the horse's shoulder, humming quietly to him, like she always did. He thought about how close he had come to losing this, to losing him. All because he had trusted fear, more than he had trusted the animal, who'd never once given him a reason to doubt him. The sky outside the barn slowly deepened from orange to purple. The first stars began to flicker awake above the Montana plains. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called its voice thin and lonely across the land. Walker Ranch settled back into its familiar quiet. But something in Ethan had changed forever. He reached out and scratched gently along Iron's neck. The horse shifted slightly closer, leaning into his touch. "Thank you," Ethan murmured, "for saving me, and for waiting for me to fix the mess I made." Iron didn't answer, of course. He just kept breathing steadily beside him. And for Ethan Walker, that was more than enough. The days that followed felt strangely quiet at Walker Ranch, as if the land itself were catching its breath after everything that had happened. The routines returned, filling troughs, mending fences, riding the pastures. But something in the atmosphere had shifted in a way Ethan couldn't quite name. He worked slower now, more thoughtfully. Every time he walked past Iron's stall, he paused just a little longer than necessary. Iron, for his part, had recovered completely, his coat glossy again, his gait steady, his appetite strong. To anyone else, he looked like the same horse he had always been. But Ethan noticed something new. Iron didn't wander the yard the way he used to. He didn't meander between the fence lines or stick his head over the corral to watch the road. Instead, he stayed close to the house, or more specifically, close to Lily. Whenever Lily stepped outside, whether to fetch water, chase the dog, or jump rope, Iron seemed to drift toward her, not crowding her, not overbearing, just present. At first, Ethan chalked it up to coincidence, the remnants of a shaken horse seeking familiarity. But the pattern didn't break. One afternoon, Ethan stepped out onto the porch and froze mid-step. Lily was skipping rope near the barn, humming quietly to herself. The sun lit her hair like strands of pale gold. Iron stood only a few yards away. His head was high, his ears locked forward. His tail was still. He wasn't eating. He wasn't grazing. He wasn't drinking. He was watching. Every time Lily hopped to a new spot, Iron adjusted with her, keeping the same distance, like a silent shadow on four legs. When she dropped the rope and headed toward the house, Iron finally exhaled a long release of tension Ethan could see even from a distance, and walked back to the trough as if a switch inside him had flipped off. Ethan frowned. That wasn't coincidence. It was intention. It was protection. The realization unsettled him, not because he feared Iron, but because he remembered how badly he had misunderstood him once before. And he had no intention of repeating that mistake. The first warning came at dawn, 3 days later. Ethan was carrying a bucket to the barn when he heard hooves scraping sharply against packed dirt. Iron was pacing short, clipped steps, tail slicing the air. His nostrils were flaring, his ears pinned back not in aggression, but in razor focus. He positioned himself directly between Lily, who had just walked out with her school backpack, and the fence behind the barn. Daddy, Lily said, confused Iron's doing it again. Ethan's pulse spiked, memories of the rattlesnake slicing through him. But this time he didn't let fear take control. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He remembered. He remembered the crushed snake, the hoof prints, the truth Iron had tried to show him before. "Stay here, Lily," he instructed, voice low, but steady. "Don't move." He picked up a wooden staff leaning against the barn wall and walked slowly in the direction Iron was fixated on. The horse didn't move, except to shift slightly, keeping himself in front of Lily like a shield. Ethan stepped around a water barrel, then the feed shed, and there it was. Exactly where Iron's gaze had been locked. Depending on how the final detail is chosen in the story, it could have been a second rattlesnake coiled in the shade, or a lean, sharp-eyed coyote edging too close to the yard, or the fresh, unsettling imprint of boot tracks leading across their private land. Whichever it was, the danger was real, immediate, and exactly where Iron had marked it. Ethan stood still for a long moment, the staff gripped loosely in his hand. The morning wind rustled the grit beneath his boots, but he barely heard it. Iron had sensed it before he had. Again. Slowly, Ethan turned around. Iron wasn't thrashing or stomping or panicking. He didn't look wild, didn't look dangerous. Instead, the big gelding stood quietly before Lily, muscles taut, every line of his body, communicating one singular message I saw at first. I'm here to keep her safe. Ethan swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. You saw it before I did, didn't you? He murmured. Iron blinked once, ears angling toward Ethan's voice, as if acknowledging the truth. And for the second time in a week, Ethan felt humbled, deeply, profoundly humbled by the instincts of the animal he had almost lost. From that point on, Ethan made a deliberate effort to observe Iron with new eyes. He paid attention to the angle of the horse's ears, the tension in his stance, the flicker of his gaze. He learned the difference between a horse who was bracing out of fear and one who was bracing to protect. He realized Iron had never shown true aggression, not once, not even when Ethan had treated him like a threat. Iron hadn't been dangerous. He'd been vigilant. It changed everything in the way Ethan moved around him. One evening, as they brushed Iron together, Lily looked up and said, "Daddy, I think Iron can feel danger before we can. Like a big guardian." Ethan smiled. "A guardian, huh?" "Yeah," Lily said, patting Iron's shoulder. "My big guardian." Iron lifted his head slightly, as if the title suited him. And Ethan, remembering how Iron had tracked Lily across the yard, how he had placed himself between her and unseen danger without hesitation, couldn't argue with it. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I think you're right." But even with their new understanding, Ethan wasn't free of the remnants of his old fear. It came back one night in a dream, sharp and vivid. He was standing in the yard, shotgun raised, Iron staring at him with wide, wounded eyes. The trigger grew heavy beneath his finger, heavier and heavier, until he couldn't breathe. He woke with a start. Sweat clung to his skin. His breath came short. He swung his legs out of bed, pulled on boots without tying them, and walked out into the cool darkness. The barn loomed ahead, faintly lit by moonlight. Iron lifted his head the moment Ethan entered. He wasn't asleep. He simply waited. Ethan stepped into the stall, his hands trembling as he rested his forehead against Iron's warm neck. "I almost lost you," he whispered. "Because I didn't understand you. Because I didn't trust you." Iron turned, slightly brushing the side of his muzzle against Ethan's shoulder, gentle grounding, almost forgiving. Ethan closed his eyes. That small gesture lifted something heavy from his chest. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the ranch in soft gold. Lily was already outside, spinning in circles with her arms spread wide as the breeze tugged at her hair. Iron stood a few paces away, grazing calmly, but with one ear always tilted in her direction. Ethan leaned against the porch railing with a fresh cup of coffee warming his hands. He watched them, his daughter and the horse, who had become something more than just an animal on the ranch. He thought about instinct, about trust, about how close he had come to silencing something that had been trying to save him all along. Iron didn't need training to be gentle. He didn't need discipline to be safe. He just needed understanding and belief. Some bonds weren't built through reins or commands. Some were built through moments when danger brushed close, and someone, human or horse, chose to stand in its path. Ethan took a slow sip of coffee, the steam curling into the morning air. "Some guardians don't bark," he murmured to himself. "They don't shout. They just stand where danger might come and wait for us to notice." Iron lifted his head then, as if he'd heard the thought rather than the words. And across the yard, Lily laughed bright and safe beneath the rising Montana sun. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Your time, your support, and your presence here truly mean the world. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us for more stories just like this. See you in the next one.